Well, greetings again to those of you who were here the last two times that I was here. And greetings for the first time for those of you who are new to the congregation since then. I've been looking forward to this with great anticipation. I have been blessed by the previous times that I have been privileged to be here, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to come again. Thank you for the invitation. I truly feel like coming here has been more beneficial for me, probably, than it has been for you. So thank you for ministering to me. It's just something very refreshing about this congregation. And I'm sure, in fact, mentioned this in the prayer meeting this morning, you may not sense that because you're here all the time and it sort of becomes routine for you. But as one who's not here often, I can sense that immediately when I'm among you, and I thank the Lord for what He has done and is doing here. And I know that you're not without your trials. We all are. Goodness knows we all have them. But God is good. God is gracious. Marty and I are thrilled because just this very morning, or was it last night? Anyway, she got a text from a dear friend of hers, high school friend that we were both in high school with years ago, that she stays in touch with and has been very burdened for her children, one in particular, who grew up in a Christian home and went to Bible-believing churches, evangelical, maybe not quite as sound in the faith as we have come to understand now, but nevertheless in gospel-preaching churches, and then just left the faith and strayed and was no longer interested in spiritual things, and that went on for years. And his family prayed for him fervently, and we prayed for him from time to time, and got word this morning he's come to Christ. I'm still overcome. He wrote a 6-page letter to his mother to explain how he'd come to Christ. And it hasn't been that long since, in our own experience, a young man that was in our church, I baptized him when he was 18 or 19 years of age, and then he drifted off into the world. Not drifted in the way some people do. He went to medical school, became a doctor, lived in Japan, Australia, other places, but just no interest in spiritual things. And now the report has come to us. He's reading his Bible. He's leading in prayer. Something's happened. I don't think he's made a clear profession of his faith in Christ yet, but something. You can't explain that except by the work of God in his heart. And we are so thrilled. God is able. We have others in our church that grew up in our church that are in the same condition. We long to see God do the same for them. I'm sure you have people in your church in the same way. Don't give up. Pray for them. God is able. Well, I didn't know if we were going to make it or not. Our journey last night was long and unexpected turns and twists along the way. But here we are. Thank the Lord. Sorry to have missed the services last night. I've already heard good things. In fact, in some of the conversation I heard about the messages last night, I said, I wonder if someone preached out of the same passage I'm preaching out of this morning. 1 Peter chapter 1. Is that by any chance? Well, really doesn't matter. I used to get worried about things like that, and then I found over the years we can have one preacher open the Word of God to a particular text and be followed by another one to open the same text, and yet we will hear different messages, different truths, and sometimes that's very beneficial. It causes us to focus upon that same passage of Scripture in a different way, two different perspectives, and it really fastens itself to our minds in that way. It's been a good many years ago now. I was visiting someone at Duke University Medical Center in Durham, North Carolina, about 35 miles from where we are, one of the major medical centers in our area, of which we're blessed with a number. It's quite amazing. And as I was lingering outside the hall waiting to go in because the nurse was was busy with the patient I had come to see, and I needed to wait until she finished, then I could go in. And I wasn't too far from a couple of ministers also in the hall who were talking not too far from me. One of them had on a identification badge, and I realized he was a hospital chaplain. And the other one, from the conversation, I realized was a pastor of somebody there in the hospital who apparently was in very serious condition. And they were talking, and I heard them say something like this. One of them said, "Well, I hope you didn't tell him that God is responsible for this." And the other one said, "Oh, no, I would never tell them that a God of love would bring anything like this into somebody's life, that I told them that was the devil who did this." And what do you do when you hear something like that? You know what you want to do. You want to walk up to them and say, "Dear gentlemen, what hope does that give to anybody? If they think that this is out of God's control, then what hope do they have?" But either being too timid or maybe too polite, I didn't say anything, but I've never forgotten that conversation. But the question, the problem of suffering, why God allows suffering, is a great problem to many people. And I think even it never becomes completely resolved in the lives of some of us who know the truth about it. Why does God allow suffering? It's a serious issue. It involves us in a general sense. We see suffering in the world around us. Why are there earthquakes that destroy homes and kill people? Why are there hurricanes that do the same? Why are there pandemic diseases that go through the world and take the lives of many people? Why these areas of suffering in this world? Many people don't understand. And then, of course, beyond the general, there's the personal. All of us have things in our lives that have touched us very deeply, and we say, "Why, Lord? Why?" And the question in the minds of many people is, if your God, or their God, as the case may be, is both omnipotent and loving, then how come these things happen? If he is loving, then he wouldn't want things like this to happen to people. But if he is all-powerful and is able to prevent things like this happening from people, and yet he still allows them to happen, how do you explain that? How can you put together this claim that God is a God of love and yet God is a God of all power? It doesn't make sense to many people. And so to some, this conundrum calls God into question. Either he is not loving, as Christians claim that he is, or he's not all-powerful, as Christians claim that he is. And hardly anybody stops to think there may be at least a third possibility, and the one I'm going to suggest to you today, and that is that God has a gracious and loving purpose for the trials. As indeed he does. That's what the Bible teaches us. And so today I invite you to open your Bible to 1 Peter chapter 1. And I will speak to you on understanding the trials of life, God's purpose for trials, primarily in the lives of his children, though, as we shall probably touch upon, he also has a purpose for them in the lives of others as well. And I'm going to read, I use in my pulpit the New King James, and I'll be reading that this morning in verses 1 through 9 of 1 Peter chapter 1. Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to the pilgrims of the dispersion in Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia, elect according to the foreknowledge of God the Father, in sanctification of the Spirit, for obedience and sprinkling of the blood of Jesus Christ, grace to you and peace be multiplied. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who according to his abundant mercy has begotten us again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance incorruptible and undefiled, and that does not fade away, reserved in heaven for you who are kept by the power of God through faith for salvation, ready to be revealed in the last time. In this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while, if need be, you have been grieved by various trials, that the genuineness of your faith, being much more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to praise, honor, and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ, whom having not seen you love. Though now you do not see him, yet believing you rejoice with joy inexpressible and full of glory, receiving the end of your faith, the salvation of your souls. My text today focuses on verses 6 and 7, and in these two verses, there are three things primarily that Peter, by the Spirit of God, is telling us. Number one is why God's people rejoice, and number two is why God's people groan, and number three is why God ordains trials. He starts by reminding us of the reasons we have to rejoice. Why God's people rejoice. In this, he tells us, verse 6, you rejoice greatly. In this you rejoice greatly. And of course that forces us to ask, in what? In what do we rejoice greatly? And that takes us back to the preceding context. You rejoice greatly, number one, because you have been born again. Back to verse 3. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who according to his abundant mercy has begotten us again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. God has begotten us. God has given us life. God has birthed us into his family. God has done a miracle of power and of life and of grace in our lives. And if you can't rejoice in that, then you haven't experienced this. You don't know what this is about, because if you've been born again, you must rejoice in that, and I know you do, the abundant mercy of God. And furthermore, God's people rejoice because you have been given a living hope. That's also part of verse 3. You've been born again, or begotten again, to a living hope. A living hope that has also been given to you by God and is sustained in you by God. A hope of heaven to come, a hope of final and full salvation, a hope of being in the presence of your Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, whom having not seen, yet you love, because God has worked that love within you. And so, kept alive and active and growing by the power of God, you have this hope, which is related to Christ's resurrection in verse 3. The power that raised Christ from the dead is the power that raised us from the dead, and the power that took Christ back into heaven and into his eternal glory is the power that gives us the hope of entering into that glory, joining him in that glory someday. And so you're rejoicing in that, surely. And you're rejoicing, verse 4, because of an incorruptible inheritance, and this all relates together. An inheritance incorruptible, undefiled, and does not fade away, reserved in heaven for you. There's nothing on earth like that. All earthly treasures, all earthly inheritances, all earthly commodities and blessings of any kind, all corrupt, all decay, all fail, and all ultimately all come to an end. That's all we know. That's the world in which we live. We've come to expect that. It's hard for us to imagine something that does not decay, cannot decay. It's eternal. It never changes. It's amazing that there can be such things, and yet we know there are, because the Bible tells us. And that is a wonderful hope within us, that we have an inheritance that cannot be taken away from us. You can rejoice in that, can't you? It's about time to say, glory, hallelujah, praise the Lord. If you can't rejoice in that, there's something wrong with you. And we rejoice because we're kept by the power of God. Verse 5, who are kept by the power of God through faith for salvation, ready to be revealed in the last time. We are kept for heaven, for this heavenly inheritance, by the power of God. And what is God doing to keep us for that inheritance? He is keeping that faith alive in us. We are kept by the power of God through faith. It's our faith that God has given us that He will protect and keep and guard and keep from failing. If it were up to me, number one, I didn't always realize this, but I certainly realize it now, that if it had been up to me, I never would have trusted Christ in the first place. I don't have anything within my nature that would have desired that. But number two, if it were up to me, I probably would have quit believing a long time ago. But you see, God has kept me by His power through faith, and He keeps that faith alive. He guards it and keeps it all the way until we're safely home, when we are in no danger of losing it. And then we will experience the fullness of it then, and it will be fully protected then. And if you can't rejoice in that, then you have a problem in your thinking, I'm sure. So that's why we rejoice. In this you greatly rejoice. Greatly rejoice. It's a strong kind of joy, an unusual joy, a deep joy in what God has done. It's a jubilant and thankful exultation, like Jesus talked about when He said in Matthew 5:12, when you are reviled and persecuted, and people say all kinds of evil things against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice, rejoice, and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. That's pretty good company. If you are put in the same company with the prophets that went before you, if you can be put in the company with Elijah and with Daniel and with folks like that, then that's not bad, is it? We can suffer if we're in that kind of company, and so we rejoice in this. And that word rejoice is present tense. We continue to rejoice no matter what happens to us. And he's getting ready to talk about the trial. So what he's saying is there is a rejoicing that cannot be extinguished by the trials of life. Our joy doesn't depend upon our circumstances. Our joy depends upon Christ and upon the promises of God and upon what He's doing in our life and His promise to complete in our life. Our joy depends upon that. Years ago, we would occasionally sing a song that said, I have a peace in my heart which the world never gave me, and a peace it cannot take away. Did you ever sing that? An everlasting peace, and I know that it's there to stay. Well, it's the same idea here. Substitute the word joy. I have a joy in my heart that the world never gave me, and a joy it cannot take away. An everlasting joy, and I know that it's there to stay. Do you know that joy? Because you're going to need it to sustain you through the trials, because this joy does not mean that there are no trials. And that's what Peter is telling us. So why God's people rejoice through all these wonderful things that He's showed us, that's why. But why God's people groan? Verse 6 again. In this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while, if need be, you have been grieved by various trials. Why do God's people groan? Because of the trials of life. They do cause us to groan. They do cause us to grieve. In fact, in that short phrase in the last part of verse 6, there are 5 things that are told us about the trials of life that will help us if we understand them. Number 1, they are temporal. That is, they are now. In this time, in this life. Though now, for a little while, if need be, you have been grieved by various trials. These trials pertain to the now and now. Much of our joy and rejoicing pertains to the by and by, but the trials pertain to the now and now, the world we are living in the present. And our trials are very much a part of this life, this temporal existence we have now. What else? These trials are diverse. Peter calls them various trials. You have been grieved by various trials, all kinds of trials. That word is literally many-colored trials. It reminds me of Joseph's coat of many colors. I've often wondered what that coat looked like. Of course, we all know from Sunday school literature, we've all seen it with the stripes and the different colors, which may or may not be what it looked like at all. But we all understand that it's made up of different colors, evidently. I won't get into the people that think it means something else entirely different. I don't want to confuse you. I don't want to confuse me. Just Joseph's coat of many colors. And that's the way our trials are. Our trials come in all different stripes, all different colors, all different kinds. He's not just talking about one kind of trial. Sometimes when the Bible is talking about our trials, it's talking primarily about the persecutions that we suffer because we're Christians, the unique trials that come to the children of God. But here Peter's talking about all kinds of trials of life. The trials of not having enough month or having too much month left at the end of the money, financial trials, the trials that have to do with our health, that have to do with the deaths of our loved ones, bereavement, a very sore and serious trial. The trials of relationships. Some of the greatest blessings we have in life have to do with our relationships, our family, our loved ones, our friends, these wonderful relationships we have in life. Some of the greatest trials we have in life have to do with our relationships, our family, our friends. The broken relationships that we have in life, they are so grievous, they are so painful. These very relationships that are able to produce great joy and encouragement, and often do, also become the source of our greatest pain. Some of these relationships, there doesn't seem to be any way to solve them. There just doesn't seem to be any end to them. There doesn't seem to be any way to address them. You do everything you know to do as a child of God, and it still doesn't solve the problem. And sometimes you just have to say, I'm going to commit it to the Lord, and it'll all get straightened out when I get to heaven. But in the meantime here, I am suffering with this difficulty. That's what Peter's talking about. The various trials of life, all different kinds. They're temporal, they're diverse, and they are painful. He says, you have been grieved by various trials. Christians experience grief. Christians have feelings of great emotional distress caused by the circumstances of life. This may be physical pain. It may be emotional pain, mental anguish. It may be sorrow. It may be anxieties of various kinds. I can almost be sure that every single person in this room right now could tell me some trial that you are wrestling with at the moment. It's just part of life in this fallen world. We are all experiencing trials at the same time that our hearts are lifted up with joy because of Christ and what He has done. And we have both of these at the same time. It's not that we have one at one time and the other at other times. We have them both together in the same life, in the same heart, in the same mind, in the same circumstance or same life that is going on. Real and deep emotions. The wonderful emotion of the joys that we have and the deep emotion of the grief and the sorrows that we have. We are not Stoics. We are normal people. We bleed when we get pricked. We hurt because of the trials of life. You know who the Stoics were, don't you? They were philosophers, and they had decided that the way to be most comfortable in life was to train themselves so that they didn't feel emotions. It's these emotions that make life uncomfortable. And so they would train themselves so that they felt neither the joys of life nor the pains of life. They were just stoic. Something terrible happens, well, that's life. Something wonderful happens, well, that's life. And that's the way some people face trials, but that's a denial of who we are as God made us. He made us with emotions. The emotions need to be expressed. The emotions need to be felt. They're supposed to be. To train ourselves not to feel those emotions is to actually diminish something of our humanity. Sometimes just because of the trials of life, we begin to get sort of calloused. We have to, you know what a callus is? Something rubs in the same place long enough, and pretty soon it becomes tough. And that can happen to our soul. We get problems that rub upon our soul for a long enough time until our soul begins to get calloused. And we're not feeling as we used to. And that's not good. That's not good. These trials are supposed to grieve us. That's by God's design. So they are temporal, they are diverse, they're painful, they're purposeful. In this you greatly rejoice, verse 6, though now for a little while, if need be. If need be. Or if it is necessary, you have been grieved by various trials. Only as it is necessary. Only as it serves a God-ordained purpose. Never are we needlessly afflicted. Never. Never. God is not some kind of sadistic ogre in the sky who likes to just pinch us to see how we squirm and enjoys watching us writhe in pain. That's not God at all. Never are we afflicted needlessly. Here's a song we sing. God never moves without purpose or plan when trying his servant or molding a man. Give thanks to the Lord, though your testing seems long. In darkness he giveth a song. Our trials are purposeful. And finally, they are temporary. Not only are they temporal, but they are temporary. They are temporary. Though now we are told for a little while. Now for a little while, if need be, you have been grieved by various trials. They are temporary. They are for a season. They do seem long in life. Though your testing seem long, it does to us. But compared to eternity, it's nothing. It's just a drop in the bucket. Another song I'm sure you all have sung. It will be worth it all when we see Jesus. When that time comes and we're with him forever, these trials of life, some of which have been very long, decades long, very painful for a long period of time, are coming to an end. They do have a termination point. And knowing that suffering is temporary and purposeful makes it more bearable. It is only here by a wise, gracious purpose of our loving Heavenly Father. We may not know the purpose, but we can trust him. He knows it. And there's a conclusion to them. They're coming to an end. They won't be there forever. Did Job ever know why he went through such terrible trials? Not according to what you read in the book of Job. He never did know. Never did. God never told him why. Well, I just can't accept this if I don't know why. If God won't tell me why, I just can't bear this. Well, then hunker down. Because God hasn't promised to tell us why. God isn't obligated to tell us why. God doesn't say, if I explain to you why, then you can bear this trial. God says, if you will trust me, who I am, my character, my goodness, my wisdom, my love, my grace, that's all you need. All you need to know is that I have done this for a good purpose. All things work together for good to those who love the Lord and who are called according to his purpose. If you know that, if you believe that, that's all you need to know. I don't know why. I don't know why. I don't need to know why. I trust God. But that brings us, number 3, to why God ordains trials. And there's 2 reasons suggested in our text. Number 1 is to test our faith, and number 2 is to bring us commendation. To test our faith. Back to verse 6, "In this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while, if need be, you have been grieved by various trials, that the genuineness of your faith, being much more precious than gold, that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to praise, honor, and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ. That, or in order that, if need be, you have been grieved by various trials, in order that the genuineness of your faith, being much more precious than gold, though it is tested by fire." To test our faith. Now, the word test, as it's used in this text, has a little bit more to it than what we usually think of in terms of testing. It has the idea of testing and purifying, all mixed in together. It's a word that is used of refining metals such as gold, which is suggested in our text here. To be tested and proven genuine, to be tested and purified, made more valuable, more pure. Gold, of course, is a valuable metal. It's durable. And sometimes we think of it as being imperishable, though this text says it perishes. It's not as durable as the faith that God has placed within us. Gold will perish, our faith will not. What a wonderful thought. When you think about gold not perishing, sometimes I think about that golden calf in the wilderness, and when Moses came down, what did he do with it? He ground it up into powder and poured it in the water and made them drink it. Maybe we need a doctor to explain to us biologically what happened next. How does that happen? I don't know, but that gold, for all practical purposes, perished. All that gold that made that golden calf, it was ground into powder and gone. It perished. But how did they, in the ancient world, refine gold? That is, how did they bring it out of the ore in which it is found? That's one reason why gold is so precious, so valuable, is because it's so difficult to extract it from the environment in which it's found. It's not easy to get it out. It takes an awful lot of work, and you've all heard of the process, I'm sure. In fact, I think they still do this sometimes in some Middle Eastern countries today, but the guy who does this has a little kettle over a fire. He heats it hotter and hotter and hotter, and he's working over that pot of gold ore that has now been brought to melting. And as the impurities rise to the surface, he skims it off, and more impurities rise to the surface, he skims them off, and more impurities rise to the surface, and he skims them off. And when there are no more impurities to skim off, then he's got the pure gold that he's looking for. I heard someone put it this way sometime: he keeps skimming off the impurities until he can see his reflection in the pot. And that's what God is doing with our faith. He is skimming off the impurities until he can see the reflection of Christ in our souls. And that's the process here. God is purifying our faith. He's removing the impure elements. He's removing the mixture of things with our faith that are not faith, that sometimes we think are faith. And he's getting that out. He's getting it down to the real, genuine thing. There is the genuine there. There's the valuable there, but it needs to be removed from the dross. And so the dross has got to go, and there's only one way for it to go, and that's through testing, that's through trials, that's through pain, that's through suffering. God, isn't there an easier way? Nope, this is the way. Testing, trials, suffering, to remove the dross that's in your faith, that's in your life. Okay? But also, not only to test our faith, but to bring us commendation. The last part of verse 7. More precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to praise, honor, and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Now, if we didn't read that carefully, we might think he's talking about praise, honor, and glory of Christ. And indeed, eventually that's what it all comes back to. But what he's talking about is praise, honor, and glory of our faith, which of course is God's faith given to us. It wasn't ours to start with. It's his, but he gave it to us, and he's working it in us. And he is going to honor it. He's going to reward it. There will be praise and honor and glory that comes to us because of this faith that God gave us, and this faith that God purified within us and tested with all these trials. And if we stand the test, we are going to be highly rewarded. Isn't that amazing? When we realize it wasn't our faith to begin with, God gave it to us. And we couldn't have sustained it. God protected it and kept it there. And yet, when God does all that work, he then says, I'm going to honor and reward you for this faith. You stayed true. You persevered. You didn't stop believing. You didn't stop trusting Christ. You didn't stop holding on to my word. And I'm going to reward you for that at the coming of Jesus Christ. Sometimes our faith doesn't seem to produce a lot of reward now, but it will in that day. How amazing is that? God does the good works in us. It isn't us that does them. God does the good works within us that we could never actually do of ourselves, and then he rewards us for doing them. God purifies the faith within us that we had nothing to do with, and it was all of grace, and then he rewards us for that faith that was exercised faithfully and perseveringly over time. And when you understand that, then the trials make a lot more sense, don't they? What God is doing. So why is there suffering in this world? Well, we all know. We didn't mention this in the text, but there's suffering in this world because of sin. There's suffering in this world because it's a fallen world. There's suffering in this world because it's not the way God originally made it. And the suffering that we have in this world is a reminder of sin and of the seriousness of sin. We need to understand that. And so when it comes to the sinner, why is there suffering in his life? Hopefully, as God shows him what's going on, hopefully, so that he will recognize the reality and the seriousness of his sin. This is what sin produces, and eventually death. And if you don't want to go there, then turn from your sin and turn to Christ. It has a good purpose there. But in the lives of believers, it is to test and purify our faith. It's to validate its genuineness and durability. It's to reveal its worth and to reward its beauty. When God gets done with it, it's going to be a thing of such amazing beauty, and then he's going to reward us for that. I earlier made reference to this hymn, and I'm going to go back to it. Oh, rejoice in the Lord, God never moves without purpose or plan. That was written by Ron Hamilton. Ron Hamilton is a musician. Any of you familiar with Patch the Pirate? That's Ron Hamilton. You know why he's Patch the Pirate? Because he had cancer in his eye, and his eye had to come out. So he wore a patch. So what did he do? He just turned it into an asset. He became Patch the Pirate and continued serving the Lord. quite amazing. Now he has dementia. He's a little younger than I am, but he's had dementia for a number of years. His wife, Shelley, takes care of him and once in a while posts on Facebook, and I see the posts, so I kind of keep up with him. I knew Ron as a young man. But his faith is beautiful. He wrote this, "Oh, rejoice in the Lord," after he lost his eye to cancer. God never moves without purpose or plan. When trying his servant and molding a man, give thanks to the Lord, though your testing seems long. In darkness he giveth a song. I could not see through the shadows ahead, so I looked at the cross of my Savior instead. I bowed to the will of the Master that day. Then peace came, and tears fled away. Now I can see testing comes from above. God strengthens his children and purges in love. My Father knows best, and I trust in his care. Through purging, more fruit I will bear. Rejoice in the Lord, he makes no mistake. He knoweth the end of the path that I take. For when I am tried and purified, I shall come forth as gold. Shall we pray?